A fishing village surrounded by barbed wire turned into a metropolis of 17 million people that now crushes Silicon Valley. The miracle cost sweat, tears, and the biggest capitalist experiment in history. Welcome to Plexo. August 1980. A muddy border in Guangdong province, home to barely 30,000 souls who lived off nets and mud. Deng Xiaoping, China's supreme leader standing just 5 feet 2 inches tall, picked up a pen and drew a circle on the map. That stroke on paper founded the Shenzhen Special Economic Zone. The plan was communist heresy: isolate a piece of land, inject free market rules, and see what happened. To make the experiment work without contaminating the country, they made a radical decision. In 1982, the army built the second line, a brutal physical scar, 50 miles of electrified fence patrolled from 163 watchtowers. Its goal wasn't to keep citizens from escaping, but to stop millions of desperate Chinese from storming into the new capitalist paradise. Inside that steel cage, Beijing's laws ceased to exist. The state offered land at fire sale prices, eliminated taxes, and guaranteed near-free labor for any foreign company. The response was immediate. International capital, hungry for profit margins, flooded across the border. Factories devoured rice paddies, the sky turned industrial gray, and Shenzhen began mutating at a speed the world had never seen. A simple circle drawn on a map gave birth to the most coveted and most feared city of the 20th century. To build this empire from nothing, you needed young blood. In the 1990s, millions of farmers abandoned their land and traveled south. They weren't looking for political freedom, they wanted a paycheck. Shenzhen became a magnet for the most disciplined and cheapest labor on the planet. The work pace was so frantic that the government coined an official term, Shenzhen Speed. Its greatest symbol was the Guangdong building, a 53-story skyscraper that rose at a rate of 1 floor every 3 days. While the Western world took months to approve construction permits, in this city cranes worked 24 hours a day, lit by industrial floodlights that never let night fall. But the miracle's engine wasn't in the skyscrapers, it was in industrial parks like Longhua. There, in 1988, Foxconn opened its first factory. What started as a workshop became a walled city where up to 400,000 people lived and worked. Workers slept in massive dormitories inside the compound. Their lives were timed to the second, assembling the electronic devices the world consumed. It was hyper-compressed capitalism, where only the production quota mattered. The physical image of this pressure was nightmarish: huge nets installed on dormitory facades to keep exhausted young workers from jumping. The price of the miracle wasn't measured in dollars, but in generations consumed by the machine. But Shenzhen didn't settle for being the West's cheap factory. In the early 2000s, workers who had assembled the world's devices decided they could make them themselves. That's how the Shanzhai phenomenon was born, a culture of industrial piracy that turned the city into the Wild West of tech. The epicenter of this revolution was Huiqiangbei, the largest electronics market on the planet, with over 38,000 businesses. The physical scene is brutal. Under fluorescent lights, a vendor can assemble a smartphone from scratch in 15 minutes, snapping together loose parts on a scratched glass counter. What took months of design in California was copied, improved, and sold the next day here. This mass piracy, far from destroying the economy, created a hyper-accelerated innovation ecosystem. By ignoring intellectual property, Chinese engineers shared schematics and components at breakneck speed. Shenzhen stopped being a simple assembly shop and became the world's hardware brain. Out of that creative chaos came giants that now dominate entire markets. In 1995, BYD was born. It went from making batteries to leading global EV sales. In 1998, Tencent was founded, the digital empire behind WeChat. And in 2006, DJI started designing drones that now control nearly the entire commercial market. The student had surpassed the master, and the West kept looking the other way. All this explosion of wealth didn't flow into a traditional free market. Shenzhen is the laboratory of Chinese state capitalism. Here, the government controls the land, banks handpick who gets funded, and tech companies operate under Beijing's watchful eye. The result was a real estate bubble of biblical proportions that split the metropolis into two parallel worlds. If you look up in the financial district, the sky belongs to the Ping An Finance Center, a 1,965-foot skyscraper clad in stainless steel and glass. It's the fifth tallest tower in the world, a monument to software billionaires and real estate moguls driving imported sports cars. But in the shadow of that colossal wealth, the other Shenzhen survives. In enclaves like Baishizu, 150,000 migrant workers cram into less than half a square mile. The image is suffocating, a maze of alleyways with no sunlight, flanked by so-called handshake buildings, concrete blocks built so close together that neighbors can touch each other from their windows. While Tencent executives sign million-dollar deals in revolving restaurants, the workers who build the infrastructure return each night to these urban villages. Communism promised absolute equality, but to survive, it had to spawn Asia's most competitive city. Money flows in torrents, the working class is trapped in a wheel designed by the state itself, and no one in the financial district seems to notice. Today, the engine that powered the entire world is starting to seize up. Shenzhen's speed has slammed head-on into an unavoidable crisis. The trade war with the West, tariffs, and China's real estate collapse have brought the once invincible city to a screeching halt. The physical image of this fall materialized in early January 2022. In the Nanshan district, a crew of workers dismantled, letter by letter, the massive Evergrande logo from the facade of its headquarters, a 43-story skyscraper. The world's most indebted real estate giant, which had moved to Shenzhen to crown its success, had to flee the city in December 2021 to save on rent. It was the perfect symbol of an era of excess coming to an end. Shopping malls that once overflowed with shoppers now show lowered blinds. Exports have fallen, and young engineers who once dreamed of founding the next tech empire now face mass layoffs and exhausting workdays that no longer guarantee the promised wealth. The experiment that began in 1980 with a circle drawn on a map proved that the free market can lift millions out of poverty in record time, but also that it can create terrifying financial fragility. Shenzhen showed that the world's most aggressive capitalism doesn't need democracy to function, it just needs a generation willing to sacrifice itself completely at the altar of production.